Everyone, to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council, the very last one for this financial year. And it is my pleasure to invite Reverend Te Ata Roy, Māori chaplain for the University of Otago and Otago Polytechnic, who will open the meeting with a prayer.
Morena koutou katoa, e te rangatira the mea tēnā koe e ngā rangatira mā tēnā koutou katoa. Nō ku te honore ki te inoi I tēnei wā, me inoi tātou. E te atua kaharawa, tēnei te whakamoi me tiki a koe, ko koe te kaihango te ao, te kaihango ngā mea katoa, nau te mana, nau te kororia, nau te pūrotu. God Almighty, we give thanks for this new day, for the gift of life and for the privilege of gathering in this place of decision-making and service. We acknowledge the sacred whenua beneath our feet, the land of Otipoti, cared for by mana whenua through the generations. May we honour their legacy and walk with humility. We ask for wisdom and clarity for every person present today. May the work of this council be guided by justice, integrity and compassion. Let the voices of all people in our community, young and old, tangata whenua and tauiwi, the housed and the unhoused, be heard and valued. In a world of challenge and change, help us to hold fast to truth, hope, to serve with courage and to seek kotahitanga, unity over division. May our deliberations be thoughtful, our actions responsible, and our outcomes a blessing to the people of this city and the generations yet to come. We pray for the emerging leadership, our rangatahi, our mokopuna, that they will follow in the footsteps of these leaders here today. Whakapaingia e tēnei hui, bless this meeting. Whakaki a mātou ki te aroha, te māramatanga, me te rangi Māori, fill us with love, understanding and peace. Ki roto e tō ingoa tapu, mā te atua mātua te tama, me te wairua tapu, ake, āmene.
Ngā mihi nui. Thank you. Now, we'll move on to the agenda proper. There is no public forum, but we have an apology for lateness from Councillor Fiso, and we have at least 4 councillors online, 3 of whom you can see on the screen, Councillors Barker, Gilbert and Walker, and Councillor Wiley is also in the Zoom room. So we do have good attendance here today. So I move that Council accepts the apologies for lateness, and well, we don't need an apology for being on Zoom. Do I have a seconder for that? Deputy Mayor Lucas, all in favour say aye. Against? Carried. And next we move on to confirmation of the agenda. So I move that the agenda be accepted without any additions or alterations. Seconder Deputy Mayor Lucas, do I have any comment on that? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Number 5, declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making if there's any conflicts. Are there any changes to the register? I see none, therefore I move that the council notes the elected members register with the management plans associated with it. Seconded Deputy Mayor Lucas, all in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Adoption of the 9-year plan. Ms Allen, Mr McAuliffe and Ms Bodecker come to the desk and answer questions as required. Yes. So firstly, are there any prefacing remarks this morning?
So, good morning, councillors. You'll have received this morning from Ms Bodecker the audit opinion that goes with the 9-year plan. You'll see that following this process we have an unqualified audit, which is a fantastic outcome. The document this is the first time in many years that we can remember that we've actually been able to provide you with a graphically designed document for adoption. So I think, and I'm sure many of you will acknowledge, but I want to acknowledge the work of the team that has pulled this together, from our numbers people to the words people to our designers. So led by Carolyn, Hayden, Sharon and Janet, the team have done a remarkable amount of work in a very short time to get the document in this position unqualified. So it's a testament to their hard work. And we're now open to questions.
Yes, look, and I'd just like to reinforce those comments, because if anyone's read through the 400 pages, nearly 400 pages of our 9-year plan, to get that through audit without qualification is a great achievement, especially in the time available that is and the work that it takes to get it done. So thank you very much. But you have further comments about the topic?
Oh, no, thank you, Mr Mayor. We're happy to take questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Vandevers.
I have complained about the lack of debt data in the 9-year plan overview from the Chief Executive and in that document. And I find myself in the same position here if I look at page 18. It says here the forecast debt at 30th June 2026 is 783 million. The question there obviously is, it's an increase of what? And then increasing to 1.165 billion by 2034. Is it not possible simply in all these pages of information to have each debt increase tabled or graphed? And I have asked for this graph repeatedly over the last couple of months now. The Chief Executive's last reply was that he didn't want to do a graph until we had actually confirmed the 9-year plan. To me, the point of having the graph of the draft was to inform our confirmation of the 9-year plan. So what I'm looking for, and not found easily, is the debt increase this year, the debt increase proposed next year, the debt increase proposed the year after, in particular. If we go far out, they are, in my view, fond hopes anyway. But certainly if I could have those figures now, it would be helpful.
I'll answer first.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor, do you want a different graph than the one that's on page 46?
This one. Paddy,
Oh,
no,
sorry,
page
46 of my agenda, so sorry.
Page 46 of the 9-year plan.
Yeah, 46 of the
which is
9-year
part of
plan.
the papers. So we have, in addition to the agenda and papers for the day, we have
Yep.
nearly 400 pages of the 9-year plan, which includes a debt graph on page 46.
Yes, I did want the graph that I've long asked for, and that is the contextual one that shows what the debt has been. The graph that we've had in our finance papers earlier, but that doesn't seem to be able to make its way into this. This, what I consider to be a forward-looking only without context graph. That is to say, this is what we hope is going to happen, but without the context of actually seeing what has happened and how dramatic the increase in debt has been in the last few years, this graph I feel is insufficient. I also believe that we should have spelled out not just the rates increase for each year, but the debt increase for each year. So if staff could just, so I could write it down now, give me the previous year, the coming year and the year after that, debt increase numbers.
Thank you, Councillor. If you turn to the 9-year plan document, page 197. And towards the bottom of that table, you've got a net cash inflow, outflow from financing activity. That is the net change in debt per year. So you'll see in the 25-26 year, we're increasing debt by 121 million. The page before that has the financial position, which shows term loans as well. But we also have a table in the financial strategy that's on page 50 that shows the debt alongside our debt limit. It also shows the rates revenue alongside our rate limits. And with respect to the historical chart that we provide every month with our finance reports to Council, we will be updating that after today with the 9-year plan and the statement of intent numbers. We'll also have the year-end position at the end of today, so we'll have an actual for 30 June 2025.
Thank you for that. Why is it that the debt is not classified as debt increase, and people have to look through to page 197 to find net cash inflow outflow? Why is it not labelled? Why is it not clearly signalled to be debt increase?
Well, the lines above that do say loans raised or loans repaid, but bearing in mind these are compliant financial statements, so that's why we do have a summary table inside the financial strategy that calls it out debt. So we do have a couple of places in the document that have debt.
And I'd just ask further of the councillor, the pay on 46, the graphs that we show there, there's two graphs on that page, one showing the rates increase and how it drops off, and the debt increase in graphical format, as we can see, each year, which shows it going up and then flattening off. So not only is the rates dropping down, the debt increase is flattening off, so that there's very little debt increase in the later years of the 9-year plan.
If I could add, this is as the CFO has said, a technical accounting document in parts, and it has to be to meet all our various compliance obligations. We have attempted in various of parts to try and put the information in a more user-friendly way, but councillors are aware that we are looking at how we do our financial reporting anyway, and making sure that it is less accounting really, and easier and more transparently understood. So that is work that is underway.
Thank you.
Okay. While we're on the subject of page 46, I have a couple of questions about that. Down the bottom right-hand corner, debt limit. As of June 30, today's date 1 year ago, 2024, our net debt percentage was 110. Do we have an idea at this stage already what our net debt percentage is? And net debt as a percentage of total revenue?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, do you mean for today?
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, it's as of today and as of this 9-year plan, because of course there will be a whole lot of calculations subsequent to our deliberations that had to be incorporated into this figure, and you may not have it yet.
We don't have it right in front of us.
Yes,
what we can tell you is that what we'd forecast was 662 million today for debt. We're currently sitting less than that, but as far as the metric goes, I don't have it in front of me. Sorry.
That's perfectly right. I didn't expect that you know, because it didn't feature in here, and you wouldn't necessarily have calculated for that yet. However, one of the things that feeds into is the Standard & Poor's credit rating, and that is something that they look at. And we were AA, and now we're AA minus. But my understanding was that our credit rating was downgraded because of the general effect right through New Zealand of local water done well, serving to increase debt in a great many councils much higher. And so some councils that have formed CCOs are able to go to 500% of debt versus revenue, whereas we have remained well within our financial limits. And last year was, net debt was 110, and I expect we're probably a little bit higher than that this year, but not going to be, huge. And we're certainly a long way away from 500%. So my question is that are we, because we've kept debt and the long-term view for debt is relatively low, whilst still retaining water in-house and being able to fund that with very substantial increases in funding over the 9 years, is that likely to improve our Standard & Poor's credit rating? Or it's too hard to tell?
Well, we're not experts in that, Mr. Mayor, and it's probably not something we can answer. If we were to hazard a guess, I would have thought that the macroeconomic factors that are in play probably outweigh the local issues, because that, as you said, is what largely drove the change previously.
Right, thank you. We have a question from Councillor Barker from the far-off land of somewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a question about funding depreciation, and because I am not here, I don't have my stickies and I don't know what page it's on. However, I just noted that there was something about the different percentages that we were funding different amounts of depreciation by, and I wondered whether we were looking to fully fund depreciation and in what year that might be.
I've read that.
Thank you, Councillor. From year one, we have a balanced budget. So overall, that means that we are funding our depreciation. However, we do note that in the Three Waters activity, we still do show a deficit, and that will be funded by year 3. And also in year 1, there's a small deficit for community housing. But as we go throughout the plan, that is also funded by year 2. So all of council will be fully funded for depreciation, including Three Waters, by year 3.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor O'Malley.
It's to the answer to that last question, because I imagine that Three Waters wasn't balanced, and as we were going to balance in Three Waters, how did we achieve a balanced budget if Three Waters isn't balanced?
So overall council, we've got other surpluses and other activities which are netting out the Three Water activity. So overall we're balancing our budget, but then when we specifically look at Three Waters, there's a deficit there. However, we do have surpluses in other areas due to other factors like dividends coming in or investment property revaluations and the like, which then offset the deficit that is showing in water.
And so if we had a balanced Three Waters budget, we'd be showing a surplus.
Correct.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Gary and then one from Councillor Walker online.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Minor editorial matter, but nonetheless important for consistency and respect for mana whenua. Page 6, Peninsula Connection is mentioned without Te Awa Ōtako, although later in the document it's referred to as Te Awa Ōtako Peninsula Connection. I wondered if Te Awa Ōtako could be added to that 6th paragraph on page 6.
We haven't yet done the final run through, so if councillors have any of those kind of minor editorial matters, and we've had some sent through, just flick them to maybe Sharon and Janet, and we'll make sure they're captured.
Sam, yeah, so feel free to share the benefits of your proofreading. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, kia ora, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, too loudly.
Oh, good. That's probably a good thing. So you will hear me. And thank you, Lynn. I have no idea how that little handy thing goes up, because it's been so long since I've used this. One of my questions has been asked, but I've got a more generic question related to the process we've just been through in terms of having the long-term plan delayed, obviously due to the Water Services Act repeal palaver. Just probably for the CEO, in terms of, because I have my own views on this, it's been fairly problematic fitting this long-term planning, financial, the aspirations of the organisation just this close, or in year 3. If this was to happen again, there's no reason it may not. If circumstances allow, what in essence, what learnings have there been, and what things would we not do next time? I know it's a fairly generic question, but I am quite interested to know what have been the difficulties in doing the long-term plan. I guess so close to the end of the election cycle, if for no other reason.
Look, with water reform rolling out in a local body election year, this was always going to be a difficult process. And so regardless if we'd been doing an annual plan, we would have had a full amendment this year, because council wouldn't have made their decision on water, and which would have been almost as much work and raised almost as many issues, because with a full amendment, it opens everything else up for full public consultation. So it's the legislative program from the government is largely what has driven the challenges, I think, with the 9-year plan process. But we will do a debrief with councillors following this, just to check where we could improve things and what we can do differently in 2 years' time when we have the 10-year plan.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. On page 44, there's a commentary there about the ability to deliver on the planned capital program, which links into the financial assumptions on, I think it's page 245. And I'm thinking especially the financial assumptions where we said there was a low risk, probably when we wrote them, we hadn't added in the significant amount of extra capital projects. And I'm just wondering, do we still think there's a low risk that we won't be able to deliver on our CapEx program? Because that was what we originally had thought, but now we've added, nearly 100 million in. I'm just wondering whether we still think that's our ability to deliver.
Reference, sorry, I've got one, but
it's a commentary on mine, it's on page 44 and under the heading ability to deliver on the planned capital program. There's a paragraph there. And then on page 245, I think it is, under our financial assumptions, where we talk about low level of uncertainty. And I'm just wondering whether...
My view, and I've said this before, and I've come for a bit of criticism for it, I think that year 1 will certainly be ambitious, but we will gear up, I suspect, for the following year. So overall, taken in the context of the overall program, I think we're probably right, but it will take us a bit of time to gear up in year 1.
Thank you. I think we've covered all the questions. Thank you very much. And I'll just make a comment based on Councillor Walker's question. The reason why possibly he's even asking that question is councillors have been shielded from the difficulties that the team have had putting this together in the volume of work required, thanks to their diligence and expertise. So thank you very much to the staff for pulling this together. And when we see 400 pages of 9-year plan, that does give us an inkling of what was required. And to get to this point with a fully compliant plan as far as audit is concerned, so that makes a significant difference, because that has not always been the case. Having said that, I'll now move that Council adopts the revenue and finance policy, the 9-year plan, and the independent auditors report, the and we adopt the 9-year plan, we authorise the Chief Executive Officer to make any minor editorial changes as a result of our proofreading, and authorise the Chief Executive Officer to draw down debt up to a total debt of 800 million in the 25-26 year. Do I have a seconder for that? I was looking to, yes, Deputy Mayor Lucas. So, in speaking to this, I'll repeat all my previous comments. No, I will just go straight to the chase in that, we live in difficult times because we're under a lot of pressure of regulation from the government to get water systems improved, and we don't have to look very far around the country to see communities in dire need of improvement, and with really significant consequences happening in their communities and waterways and what have you as a result of previous low investment in water. We're also in that position in that we see various aspects around our community of previous lack of investment in stormwater, wastewater, and even some small examples of freshwater. And so this 9-year plan turns that around and increases dramatically our expenditure on infrastructure, particularly in the area of water. And so we've refocused our finances in that area. Simultaneously, we have always cries from the community to keep rates down, but unfortunately, the only people that have the mandate to pay for our water is us, our community. The government is not going to pay for our water. So they have made provision for communities throughout New Zealand to increase their debt limits to 500% of revenue if they put their water in a CCO. And because we've made early investment in water, and I certainly acknowledge Councillor O'Malley's drive to do that, and I share that drive, but Councillor O'Malley has done a lot of work in this area as Chair of Infrastructure, and the team on Council have worked very hard to get our water systems improved, and we have been spending now for some years on it, and our budget is increasing on it. And in particular, we saw on the weekend a heavy rain event, and luckily, crisis was averted, but it didn't get to any huge extent as it has done in the past, and the water systems are coping, but only just. So the need for improvement, especially in our stormwater, is very urgent, and so consequently, we have a significant amount of money early in the 9-year plan to deal with the systems in South Dunedin in particular, but across the whole territory, there are improvements in our water systems, stormwater, freshwater, and wastewater. And we're also very lucky or privileged to have the benefit of some early expenditure quite a few years ago, maybe 30 years ago, with the Tahuna wastewater plant. And so the wastewater discharge from this community is actually of a very high level. And as I explained to some scientists that I spoke with over the weekend, we have primary and secondary treatment of our wastewater there, and then further to that, we sterilise the water with UV as before we discharge it into the environment. So I have spoken with commercial divers who have serviced our outfall pipe, and they tell me that the discharge from the end of that pipe is clear. I've also seen boats out there fishing off the end of it, which I haven't participated in, but astonishingly enough, they'll be catching fish there and presumably eating them. So it is an indication of the quality of wastewater treatment that we do have here in the city. And that can only be done by the spending of money. And we have to have people within council, we have to have a significant team to be able to deal with all of the infrastructure that this city requires. So people call for rates reductions and getting rates down, but we have to have a team that's large enough to deal with the volume of work that we have. We have billions of dollars of infrastructure. we're servicing, a large, far-flung community in the land area. We're one of the largest territorial authorities in New Zealand. And so we have to spend the money to make it happen. And it's just an impossible conundrum to want to have rates rises very low when we have inflation every year regardless, plus high interest rates, plus other factors, and infrastructure that needs maintenance and repair and upgrading, and in many cases, improvement, expansion. So, and we don't have to look that far, but we can look all around the country. And I did provide a graph to everyone in the room showing the deficit of infrastructure spend that some other communities are experiencing, some of the fast growth communities where the growth has gotten away, and they've got consequent wastewater problems in particular, but also stormwater. So it is beholden on us as safeguards of the safety, health and security of this community to be spending the money to improve that infrastructure. And to be fair, the government has tasked us with that job. So our focus has been on infrastructure. We've shifted our spending to that, and I think, we can't wave a magic wand and have it all instantly installed, but this council has taken the brave decision to actually increase expenditure on infrastructure and get things sorted out finally. Thank you. Who else? Would anyone else like to make a comment? Councillor Hulan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a lot I'd like to say. What I'll first say is that what a lot of people don't realise is that behind the scenes we have had this whole term numerous workshops, numerous meetings. Our whole term, almost, I'd say the majority of it, has been filled up with legislation that the government has put on us, and that's been around the Three Waters. That's now I forget what the name of it is now. It changes so often. It was Water Done Well or 10 Waters or 10 Pipes. But anyway, we have had, all of that. Now, of course, we've got the RMA reform coming on. We've got, you name it. I could sit here going on. I've only got 5 minutes, so I can't go on and on about all the legislation that we've been hit with. But local government is getting all of us, not just us, every council around the country has been hit by numerous laws and legislations and rules, ironically, from a government that says they're trying to cut down red tape. But, every time a law is changed or a law is made, we get extra work and often extra cost. I would say if you looked at the finer detail, the majority of the costs we've got here in our budgets is through things that have been put on us by government. And, it's completely unfair because council doesn't have the funding to do it. We're limited in the way we can do it because we only have our rates base and obviously fees to entry for some things. And it does limit what you can charge, and yet they're talking about putting a cap on rates. And I understand, obviously, residents would love that as a ratepayer. I love that idea too. But at the end of the day, councils have to function. And I know rates are too high. They are high, but our rates are high here, but they're high in almost every other council in the country. Every council is facing this problem, not just us. It's not like we're the, lone one with this problem. So, and it's been caused by, the majority of it has been caused through numerous changes to legislation from previous and present governments. And it is a major problem. We need, to a degree, to get government out of local government. And as soon as that happens, the better. Of course, we'd like them to give us funding, but we could really do with less of this. And I think what I also want to say is there's been some criticism in the public by some people who are saying, oh, that Dunedin's going to hell in a handbasket. I think that's absolute rubbish. That's obviously my personal opinion. I'm biased because I'm round the table. But what I can say here, sitting at this table, is that every single one of the councillors that I work with around here and the mayor, we all put our heart and soul into our job. We're here all the time. We've had a much heavier workload this term. We've never complained. We've taken it on. We've taken on the campaign for the hospital. We've taken on numerous projects that aren't necessarily core council business, but the public got behind us over the hospital, and that created a hell of a lot more work for us. But we wanted to do it because it was best for the city. But the forecast for our city, we've had in the latest survey that's come out, New Zealand, Dunedin was found to be the happiest city in New Zealand. And we've got higher rates this year and next year and the year after, but after that, in this 9-year plan, the rates go down. Now, what we have done, and I've been advocating for this, and so have many others around the table, is to invest, as the mayor said before, and he's correct, to invest in infrastructure. We have heavily invested in infrastructure. So, yes, we have got problems at the moment in Surrey Street, and we acknowledge it, and we know it's there. We're very aware of it. And I know when we got reports over the weekend with the heavy rain, one of the first concerns our staff had was contacting Surrey Street residents to make sure they're okay and keep check on what's happening there. So we are aware of it, and I'm very sorry that they're suffering the way they are. However, there's 60 million in the budget that I believe most of that money will go towards in this LTP. It's set aside for 2026, I think, if I'm right. And a lot of that money will go towards South Dunedin and areas that will benefit Surrey Street. That Kaikorai Valley area has been a problem area for a long time. I can remember advocating for it in 2019. Oh, sorry, my time's up. I could say a lot more, but I want to say before I finish, thank you to everyone around this table. I think, we're all trying our best.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the adoption of the 9-year plan. Improving our 3 water assets, stormwater, freshwater and wastewater, is crucial for public health, environmental protection and economic prosperity. Basic needs and well-beings, the upgrades ensure safe and reliable services. Our community can have the peace of mind knowing that infrastructure is well maintained and can withstand natural hazards. In essence, improving 3 waters is not just about infrastructure, it's about investing in healthy safety and the prosperity of our communities for the long term. These 3 water reforms have been a slow rolling beast. The goalposts moved on us a few times, and Councillor O'Malley warned us about this 5 or 6 years ago while I was still on a community board, about how we've been undercharging for our water delivery services and the huge impact that would have on the city. And all of our communications to the public while we were consulting on the 9-year plan have pointed out that out of all of the rates money that we receive and the rates increase to our residents is based on the lion's share of this money needing to be invested in our 3 waters infrastructure. So it's difficult of a pill as it is to swallow. This is really important work, and as I said, it's crucial for public health. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Wiley.
I think, firstly, thank you to the staff. When you look at the report and what's presented and what will go out to the community, it's actually quite clear of actually the pathway forward with the 9-year plan and how it's been done. One of the parts that I think is one of the best I've seen is on page 16 of our report, where it clearly articulates where the money is going to be spent. And I think that's, to me, is actually the number one thing that everybody in our community should read. If they only see one page in this document, that would be it. Because once they see that page, they will get an understanding of the challenges ahead for this city. They will see where the money's going to be spent or invested. And what I would prefer the term invested, because when we look at that, there's a lot of capital costs. I talk about, and I've talked about previously, about past councils that I've been on. And I look at, again, I want to go back to these numbers because when I've talked to people around the community, as soon as I've raised these numbers with them, they have gone, oh, I see where we're at. And that is in 15-16, our rates went up 3.8%, and we were spending $37 million on capital infrastructure. 16-17, our rates went up 3%. We spent $36 million in infrastructure, capital upgrades. In 17-18, our rates went up 3%. We spent $50 million. This year, we're going to spend over $200 million. And over the 9 years, we're spending over $2 billion. I'm sorry, but every time I've talked to people and raised that, and they've had the opportunity to question me on it, as soon as I put that number and say, would you prefer to have a 3.8% increase and spend $37 million, or would you prefer to have a 10.7% increase and spend over $200 million? 98% of them have said yes. One of them was, oh, I'm not sure. But nobody's walked away going, I still disagree with you, I still don't like that. When we see the trolls on social media, and they are trolls because a lot of them are anonymous, they're not real people. I've offered to have coffee with a few of them, they disappear pretty quick. The key, and again, as I said in the previous meeting, I'll buy the coffee. The key thing is, for a lot of the community, they're listening to a few voices. They're not listening to the wider voices, and from this table. The aspect of it is actually, this is about putting a stronger foundation in the ground for growth, and to actually ensure that our city has a real strong future for the next 100 years. And no, we're not paying for that all right now. But if we've seen in other cities around New Zealand, towns and cities around New Zealand and overseas, if you do not invest in infrastructure, you struggle with everything else. And the livability of the city diminishes. The other part being is actually, I went through this paper over the weekend again, and I'm trying to see which part of the community missed out. Which part of the community could put their hand up and say, we weren't included. And when we had the 800 odd submissions and people come and present to us, I look at this actually as a very strong, well-rounded 9-year plan. There is, every part of the community is included. There'll be some that will probably be able to pick a hole and say, not this and not that. But overall, there is a very strong reflection for our city. And I think that's the other part, the strong investment. But when we look at it in its entirety, I would say this is a very good long-term plan in 9 years. I would not agree with doing it in an election year again. But that's life, that's what we were dealt with, and we had other challenges last year. But again, I want to thank everybody that came and took part in the process, that understood the process we were going through, and also to the staff across the organisation, because as we know from all the workshops and everything else, it was a big, big job. Thank you.
Councillor Eklund.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be supporting this for a couple of reasons. One is this is the ultimate job that we are tasked to do, and there are things in here that I don't agree with, but the bulk I do. There's no doubt about the infrastructure investment that's required, and what's been put into this plan in that regard is most definitely necessary. But there are some things in this plan that we could have held back on, and to add $100 million odd to our debt this year when we could have maybe just added 20 odd million to it would have been a far better way to go. Borrowing money to provide grant activity is dead wrong, and to change our finance policy or financial policy throughout this process for the purposes of giving money to outside organisations, I think is totally inappropriate. If we want to do that sort of funding and support particular areas in a way in which they need cash to get themselves up and running or to save their particular purpose, then it's got to be done honestly. And the only honest way to do that is call it what it is. It's an operational cost. It's cash. It comes from rates. And to load 15 odd million or 17 million or whatever it is to debt for these purposes, I think was wrong. And when it comes to the 60 odd million to try and hit our carbon zero targets, well, we were told that wasn't going to enable that to happen anyway, but we still went and put another 60 million onto debt for that. So those areas, I think that we have failed in trying to keep the debt curve flattening, and maybe not this year, but in a few years' time, the cost of this funding will hit rates, because that's the only way to pay for it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. And I'd like to start thanking particularly Carolyn, Hayden, Sharon and Janet and all the staff across the organisation, because I know the work that's involved in producing something as hefty as this, and to have, in quick turnaround, to have it already graphically designed in here for us today is a huge task, and to come with a clean audit. I think the staff absolutely need to be congratulated, because it's a huge challenge, and I understand that as having worked in that area before. And when I read every single 400 page yesterday, and this is, I think, effectively our Bible. It incorporates our infrastructure strategies, our future development strategies, all our assumptions, our parts of all of our strategies across the organisation are all incorporated in that one document. And if there's only one document that anybody in our community reads, it's this, because it lays out everything that the Dunedin City Council undertakes, whether that be, libraries, animal control, resource consents, sports fields. I mean, you go on and on, water in, water out, picking up our rubbish, the whole thing, and everything is in here. And including their levels of service, and I'll call out Mr. West for the huge amount of work that I know that the team that he led on, finally rewriting those levels of service. I think probably the first time that they've been rewritten since they first came in, maybe 30 years ago. So a big thanks to the team on that. And I too, like Councillor Ackland, there's a lot in here that I don't agree with, and I didn't support when it came to it. And as you said, adding $100 million in over the last few months has definitely challenged my thinking. Like Councillor Van der Vis, and I'm sure he will speak on this, increasing our debt by $783 million over the 9-year plan to reach $1.165 billion by 2034, and that's just Dunedin City Council debt. The only little glimmer is that in 2032 we don't actually have to borrow anything, apparently it'll be great to see that in 2032, and we might even repay $4 million that year. But as I'm using Councillor Van der Vis's previous analogy of the umbrella, just seems to move along. So we'll wait and see. But I do think the $2 billion capital program is very ambitious. To be spending, approximately $200 million over $200 million every year is going to be a challenge. And I remind my colleagues last year when we made the Aurora decision to keep Aurora, that we needed to be fiscally prudent, and that's why I'm really concerned that we actually haven't been, that this long-term plan, this 9-year plan, is not a fiscally prudent plan, and that really concerns me. It is great to see that we've balanced our budget, but it does come at a cost, it is huge a rate increase for our community. And I've heard from many, and I am concerned for a lot of people in our community, that it is a struggle to be having over 10% for the next, 3 years. And I just think, I am challenged by what we are adopting today. But I understand the huge amount that has gone into it, and the great investment in our infrastructure in particular that is needed because of decisions of previous councillors who have underinvested in their city, and the birds are finally coming home to roost, and we can't let our infrastructure not be upgraded, and we've seen at the weekend at the cost that it does come. I'm just challenged by this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you everybody else. Well, thanks to staff, please. Getting us to this point, in my mind, makes you all superstars, to be honest. Like everybody else, probably bar one, I'll be voting to adopt this 9-year plan because there's much in there, of course, that is BAU and fundamental to the everyday and efficient running of a well-run local authority. And of course, central to that is almost 1.5 billion going to Three Waters roading and footpath infrastructure. That said, there are a number of key things missing from the plan that I believe will have a detrimental effect on the longer term impact of us fulfilling our strategic goal to become one of the world's great small cities. For me, on the plus side of the ledger, you have things like support for Dunedin Railways Limited, which I think is strategically wise and, as I've mentioned before, very on brand. Funding the final 3 stages of Te Awa Otaka Peninsula Connection simply fulfills a promise we should not break. The strengthening of our bond with Mana Whenua is to be applauded, of course, but we must not lose sight of those looking to diminish that bond. The construction of the very controversial Smooth Hill is a no-brainer from a waste control perspective, a philosophical perspective, and of course it's by far the best option financially for ratepayers in the longer term. And talking of waste, we simply can't continue to ignore the issue related to the old landfill site at Kettle Park. So I'm glad that we're highlighting future commitment in that space in the plan. And finally, on the positive side of my personal ledger, great to see the 137,000 to support initiatives in the Otapoti Live Music Action Plan that we adopted a couple of years back. Although I hope the Music Advisory Panel members ensure that the resource we have worked so hard to secure is focused on the OLMAP implementation plan and not diluted into the wider general Arotoi team, so be warned. I'm also glad that we voted not to charge $20 to international visitors for entry into Toitu and DPAG for international visitors at this juncture. The amount we'd have collected weighed against the potential negative impacts simply didn't add up for me and weren't worth it. On the slightly plus side is the Tunnels Trails project. The Tunnels Trails Trust have invested much blood, sweat and tears into this project. They must feel gutted that we've decided to pull back on funding them directly, but I do commend councillors for supporting my motion to let them now try to progress this excellent project without being shackled by dithering. I wish them well, as I'm sure we all do. The arts community and the various promises we've just made to them also fall into this category. Aside from the soon-to-be signed service level agreement with the Dunedin Fringe Arts Trust over Te Whareora Kutia, the rest, the Playhouse, Athenaeum, etc., looks great on paper, but I worry where our dollar commitments are placed in a 9-year plan on this. So I strongly urge the creative community to redouble their efforts in not allowing us to renege, as we have done previously on financial commitments to them. Think 17.1 for a performing arts centre. So guys, in that community, please don't let us off the hook again. Now on to the negative side of the ledger, and for me, what's missing in this 9-year plan. And some things Councillor Wiley said, where are they? Well, I'll mention one, our community housing ambition. It's gone. As I've said many times before, we're happy to scream loudly when tents for the homeless appear on the oval, but we're not prepared to continue increasing our community housing stock to help those most vulnerable in the community by addressing an acute housing shortage. Very short-sighted, I believe. And talking about most vulnerable, we're happy to celebrate the impending completion of the South Dunedin Library and Community Facility, but at the same time, not fulfill a commitment to the South Dunedin Community Network in allowing them a subsidised space in the building. Also gone are the promised increases to place-based funding, thus stymieing those groups helping our most vulnerable. Weird that we would attack this fund in the first place, but even weirder that some around the table who talk up supporting our most vulnerable supported this attack. Public toilets are gone, art in public places gone, pretty much anything to do with cycling and mode shift that's not already funded, gone, and gone at a time when people shifting to two wheels has already gathered momentum. We have
10
a lot.
seconds.
Yes, I know. We have a cost of living crisis in New Zealand and here in Otapoti, and that we should focus our attention on the most vulnerable when we set rates. So when we hit the most vulnerable where it hurts, but at the same time fund professional sport, we really have to question where our priorities as a council lie. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
An old adage that most of the time is spent on 1% of the budget. And I guess I'm just going to go back to what I think is the bulk of the budget and what people would call our knitting. Yes, we are massively increasing our capital debt, but we actually, and I will start with Three Waters, but also transport as well. But we started early on the issue with Three Waters, way ahead of any other council in the country. And as a consequence, we've spent around about 400 million before other councils even got off the ground. And some of that money was spent before the inflationary hit construction. So we've built stuff now that if we started to build it again now, would probably be 600 million in front of us. So that if you want to get on top of costs, you don't dither around with capital spend. If it has to be done, then the cheapest time to do it is now. And the best way to do that is go out and get the capital to do it and then execute it. And yes, it is already hitting us on our rates. It's hitting around about 8% of our rates, to 8% of our total income to service the interest on that. Saying that another way, we could have done no capital improvements at all and your rates would still be 92% of what they are now. So if you tell me that's bad return on investment, then I think you just want to go and check the numbers out again one more time. The reason you do capital investment is because eventually inflation is your friend. The earlier you do it, as you look back in the past and you go, wow, I can't believe we did it that cheaply back then. But if you don't bite the bullet and do it, then you are faced with having to do it as your system collapses on you, as is happening in Wellington. And then the bill will be phenomenal. And I do go to the item that the Mayor sent around last week from the Infrastructure Commission. And I think you need to look at the cost of new residential connections across the country. Ours is less than $20,000 by their books. Queenstown, Tauranga and Hamilton are over $50,000. Now we are delivering a cost-effective system, but it doesn't come for nothing. So if you wanted to simply deny it and not pay and postpone for your children and your grandchildren to pay for it in the future, then go ahead and do that. But I would say responsible, fiscally responsible behaviour is to address your problems in front of you now and address them as quickly as you possibly can. Do not be profligate, I agree, but I don't think we are. And it's to the extent that we are still behind on this, is Surrey Street again got minor flooding during this last storm. And we know that we have sections in our system that need to be upgraded and need to be brought up to a new standard. But I'm very proud of what the Three Waters team has done to date. We only have one non-compliance left on any of our plants, and that's, I think, nitric oxide production at Tahuna. And now you compare us to any other council in the region, and you look how compliant we are compared to their level of non-compliance and denial of what they have to face them. These are tough budgets. But in the end, our rates will end up being cheaper than Christchurch, Auckland's and Wellington's per capita or per connection than anybody really, because we've gone and addressed it early. Not addressing it. Just simply saying, I don't want to do it because the numbers scare me. I don't know, in the end, is that really good governance? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I agree with Councillor O'Malley about good governance in making sure that we do stick to our knitting and deliver on our infrastructure, and we have seen some really good results. And I also agree with Deputy Mayor Lucas about being concerned around this budget and whether it is fiscally responsible. I think I started off talking back in January about the people that get hit and hurt in their pockets when we put the rates rises up. This is nearly 11%. I think we need to look stronger at our OPEX. We've talked a lot about the CAPEX and what we're delivering for that, but I think the OPEX is very important as well. Really pleased we've finally got to point where we can have a balanced budget. In the last few years, we've added $100 million onto the our loans onto debt, which costs us around $4 million in interest a year, and that just keeps growing and growing. So at least we've got to that balanced budget. And that's what I asked about the depreciation as well, is that we're still not fully funding our depreciation. And obviously we've covered that with some surpluses in other areas. But that's also, we've got to look at that operational spend, because why are we getting those surpluses that we're not focusing on the other stuff? It is in our collective responsibility to pass this resolution. I'm sure that no one around the table actually wants to put an 11% or 10.7% rates rise to the public, but we've all gone on a path together to making these decisions, and we've made them by majority. Some of us agreed with some and not agreed with others, and that's how we get to this point. There's a few things that we're unhappy about, like Councillor Walker had a little bit of a list. I was not really pleased about how we went against the majority of submitters who wished us to charge for international visitors for Toitu in the art gallery. And then when we see, gosh, was it 1 or 2 days later that the Otago Museum announced that they were doing it to offset some of their costs. And I think we should have looked harder at this and listened more to the consultation. We quote consultation when it suits us, but not necessarily in this time. I'd rather we hadn't voted $800,000 onto OPEX for events before we saw a budget plan. However, I voted for it because I felt like we needed to have some commitment rather than no commitment, because there was nothing in the budget to actually put towards that, which was a bit of a gap. I thought the infrastructure strategy was logical and reasonable. I thought they've done an excellent job on that. There was great assessment of the assets and the conditions. There were plans to address the gaps and also to allow growth. So I was really pleased to have that infrastructure strategy in there. Really want to see the asset management plans published as well. I think I've mentioned them a few times, and other councils do have them online. I think that would be really helpful. I think it was Councillor Wiley that talked about if there was one page that people looked at, it was the page which showed what we spend in each area, and I think that is the one page that people do need to look at, is what does council spend money on, and it's all there and perfectly obvious in that one page. I know there's nearly 400 pages there. That's the one that people need to look at. I think there was a good Three Waters decision to keep it in-house. We actually are, as we've said many times, going to have to face the reality of how much water costs to deliver and how much it costs to take away again. I'm relieved that we've got some action for South Dunedin that people are desperate for, as we've seen over the weekend. I'm unhappy that the better off funding is now replaced by rates in some areas. It was supposed to leave us better off, but I wonder about that. Okay with the theatre decisions. I think we still need a strong proven pathway forward. And when we looked at how we put those theatre decisions together, I think that we've put some strong parameters around those so that they will come together. Well, we will vote on them again, I guess. I'm not entirely happy with the levels of service. I think they need readdressing and reassessing. I'm not happy that third-party satisfaction stats were taken out of the visitor attractions. The levels of service, nobody talks about them much, but they're really important because they are what services and satisfaction people can expect from their rates. Wasn't terribly happy with what happened with the revenue and finance policy around the eyesight. The city subsidy on the eyesights, I think it's $1.3 million budget, is just too high. I think it's snuck up to around 74% now, and it used to be around the 50% mark. So we have to watch that our ratepayers are not subsidising our visitors too much. I think those were just a few details. In general, as I said at the start, we all made votes one way or another through here and have ended up with the budget where it is. I just make sure that we're a response.
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Deliver value for money services and enable us to be on the path to be a great small city. I'm not sure that the plan actually does this. I think we've got a lot more work to do to make sure that we are delivering that value for money and that we do have the confidence of people. Thanks to everyone that submitted and to the staff for the unqualified audit. That's great work. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in the prayer this morning, one of the sentences was, let the voices of all of the people be heard. And I believe we did listen and we did hear all of the voices that then led us to this decision, which is always going to be a compromise. If ever there was a reminder of how important it was to make some of the decisions we did and ensure that the zero carbon, some of them were added back into the budget. It was at the weekend. And we have no idea yet what the cost of October's event was. And we know it was expensive, and certainly the event, the weather event over the weekend will be a high cost. So all of the work we do in that area and in the infrastructure area is going to be important. There's a lot of work going on in Water Done Well, and that's something that we have to do for the benefit of our city and a solid future, but also it's legislated as well. On page 12, the diagram which shows the proportions of money spent in different areas in the 9-year budget. I note the amount spent on creative and culture vibrancy, and it's 1% of the 9-year budget. The decisions we made in the arts were extremely positive decisions. We heard from the arts community loud and clear. And I'm proud that we had the courage to add those into the budget. Te awa o tākou, delivering on a promise made to mana whenua and the community, and a wise decision in terms of climate resilience as demonstrated at the weekend. And we listened to the people. But affordability of rates and balancing that with the need to invest is a very difficult decision to make. And I credit to all of the staff who contributed and led this work to land in the place of an unqualified audit and a balanced budget in year one. But now we come to the decision of adopting this 9-year budget, this 9-year plan. And I just remind colleagues that this will be a council decision, and we need to own it, not keep returning to the things we didn't agree with. There are going to be things in this budget that all of us did not support, various items. But we're at a point now where we need to own the council decision. We need to have the courage to own that decision, which we've based on evidence, and we've made a strategic decision in so many different areas. It's been a very complex process, and we have considered all of the aspects, we've considered all of the detail, and we've listened to our community. And we need to remember we've made the decisions for the people that we serve. It doesn't necessarily mean they will be popular decisions, but that is what we are tasked to do as governors.
Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's no point debating this plan. Those days are well and truly behind us. However, I don't think we should be patting ourselves on our backs either. More financial discipline should have been shown, in my belief. Yes, the cash has been splashed. Although called the 9-year plan, this is really only a 2-year plan. The call for funding, council funding, I believe was unprecedented, with sports, arts and the Peninsula community being the big winners. I'm sure come October, the silent majority will deliver us a pass or fail. Double-digit rate increases are simply not sustainable. However, thankfully, we have a balanced budget and we have stopped the rot. I agree with most of the speakers today. We do live in very difficult times, and I would give this budget a B-. And as the teacher would say, good signs of improvement. However, we still have room to do a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Well, we're both actually still in the morning now. Councillor earlier alluded to the way that every time a law is made or even proposed that things change, which makes things complicated to say the least. It also seems to me, though, that the chaos that has been created by the lack of clarity in many of the directions, decisions and reforms by central government do just the same. It's not solely that the goalposts keep moving. There are just too many occasions, particularly over the last couple of years, where we're not even sure what game we're playing. The fact that we have managed to get an LTP agreed on by this table and pulled together by the team has been despite those hurdles. So a huge thank you, a mammoth amount of effort that has gone into this. So a huge thank you to the team. I agree with other councillors that there are things in the LTP that I would have preferred weren't, and there are some that I was hoping for that didn't make it. Like Councillor Barker, I was disappointed that we overlooked the majority of submitters around charging international visitors. In the last few days, I've had the opportunity to speak to some people from local government here in Europe who were aghast at the decision and said things like, but that's normal, but that's what we expect. So hopefully, in my opinion, the next council will revisit this item once some data comes through from Tuhura, who have chosen to lead the way on this locally. It has been said on occasion that this is the fix-it council. Now, whether or not that is the case is probably heavily down to personal opinion. It has seemed to me that we have been forced into a position of paying for historic underinvestment. What is also clear to me, though, is that we continue to do so whilst investing in the future and keeping the purse strings as tight as practical. So on balance, I would call this a fiscally reasonable rather than splashing the cash. But surely, at the end of the day, that is democracy. We voted and came to an occasionally unanimous agreement. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor van der Vis.
In this 9-year plan, we have the highest ever level of new debt in the history of the City Council, $120 million this year. And then we top it with the highest ever level of increase in debt of $121 million proposed for the next council to try and deal with. And the justifications for this. If we look at Dunedin's development over 100 years, all the roads and the water systems and everything else was built basically without anything like this kind of debt. In fact, up until we decided to build the stadium, debt was a relatively minor consideration. The claim by Mayor Raddick that a lot of this current enormous spending is required because of a previous lack of investment in water, unquote, is then immediately contradicted when he said, quote, "It's because we have made early investment in water that we now have this astonishing quality of wastewater that we have in the city," unquote. Councillor O'Malley has also confirmed, and I quote, "We started way early on Three Waters." And yes, we did. And we don't have anything like the problems that Wellington has. But Wellington, despite needing a lot of investment now because they haven't, is the bad boy, not us. We have, as Councillor O'Malley and Mayor Raddick have confirmed, started way early and got an astonishing quality of water. Why is it that, given that we've already done all this, we are now claiming that the same early start and astonishing quality that we have, now we have to borrow $120 million extra on top of the already unmanageable debt that we already have? Councillor Ackland was dead right when he said that borrowing to fund grant activity is wrong. It's also unaffordable. Councillor Ackland was also right when he said that the 60 million plus for carbon zero was not something that he agreed with. And when we come to Councillor Weatherall, he has referred to, I believe, these same items as splash the cash. Splash the cash used to refer to maybe millions or tens of millions of dollars. We're talking about $100 million just recently that's been splashed. It's been said that the next council will have to revisit some of these things, and Councillor Weatherall quite wisely pointed out that this is actually a 2-year plan, because the rest of it is quite frankly fond hope. The 2-year plan, with the unprecedented 120 and 121 consecutive increases in millions of dollars of debt, mean that the next council will have to revisit almost everything. It'll have to revisit carbon zero. It will have to revisit borrowing for grants. It will have to revisit extending the cycleway out to the marae without any NZTA funding. It will have to revisit most of the cycleway projects that currently most people don't want to talk about. And it will have to revisit the idea that it's government that has forced us to do all this carbon zero, this cycleway, this borrowing for grants, that it's government that's driven us to do all of this stuff. The government hasn't asked us to do any of that stuff. In fact, government has been telling us that we should stick to our knitting and not do these kinds of things. This is an unaffordable budget. It's a budget that will have to be revisited and undone by the next council. And the only courage that I see around the room is what I hope to be coming when the new council actually arrives and has to deal with this unprecedented debt that we've burdened our children and grandchildren with.
Thank you. I have a few comments to make in response to some of those comments that I've heard around the table. So firstly, I'd like to agree with Councillor Gary, because everyone around this table had their say, and this is a budget that was a subject of robust debate. 4 days of deliberations to get to this point. So there are elements, as we've heard from many of the councillors, there are elements in this budget they do not agree with. And just that's probably true for everyone around the table. There are other things that they would like to see. But at the end of the day, we're here to represent our community, and we are a diverse council that does represent our community. And just like the community, people around this table have divergent views. So the name of the game is to have the good, robust debate, and then we take the vote. And that is what happened. So I would just like to point out a couple of things. Our rates rises are much lower than many of our neighbours, because, as Councillor Malley and myself have pointed out, and others, that we have gone early with expenditure on water infrastructure. Now, I would disagree with Councillor Vandervis, who's conveniently conflating the water issues, because he's talking about, I referred to our wastewater system, and that was built 30 years ago, before that period of low rates rises. And we have started on repairing, upgrading and extending the water systems networks around the city only in the last couple of years. And I did attribute that, of course, to Councillor Malley and infrastructure. But everyone around the table has played their part in making that happen. So, you know, they're quite different times in history. So, not only are we having lower rates rises than many of our neighbours, we're lower rates rises than many people around the country, many communities around the country, and I believe that we are still, of recent years, and I believe we're still there, we're below average for rates, the cost of rates in Dunedin. Now, we haven't seen any recent figures from the Taxpayers Union about that. However, they did a measure some time ago, and I believe that given the rates rises that we've had around the country to try for every community to lift their infrastructure, I think we're still below. But I did ask for parameters before we started this 9-year plan, which is to keep rates rises below 10% and to have debt dropping off, by the debt increases dropping off by the end of the 9-year plan. So we are achieving a flattening of debt, so it's not increasing at the same rate. Councillor Vandervis is right, it's certainly high at the beginning, but it flattens off, as you can see from the graph on page 47. Similarly, the rates rise does get down to 6%, so much lower than 10. But I think if councillors had come with trade-offs, then we could have had it below 10% for the first few years as well. Be that as it may, we have achieved a balanced budget, and that's the first time for a wee while as well. And people can see what we're spending money on. I agree with Councillor Wiley that the whole community can easily see, and Councillor Gary, easily see where the money is spent, and it's a nice graphical representation in that 9-year plan. And it is another significant achievement to have passed audit with no qualifications, which is also the first time for a wee while. And I agree with Councillors O'Malley and Councillor Walker that we need to spend money early on infrastructure. The sooner we spend it, the cheaper things cost. And we only have to look at the hospital for an example that something has, the costs have risen and risen because of the delays involved with that. But hopefully this coming month of July, things will start up again there again. And so I also disagree with Councillor Barker, because it's a complete contradiction to talk about being fiscally imprudent, then add the $100 million that we had popped into the budget right at the end. So, however, the votes were taken around the table, and a good number of people voted against that, but not enough to stop it, as it were. So, we have what we have because we represent a diverse community, and we are a diverse council, and we've voted, and so this is what we have to work with. Let's get on with that job. We'll take the vote by division.
Councillor Eklund.
Aye.
Councillor Barker.
Aye.
Councillor Gary.
Aye.
Councillor Gilbert.
Aye.
Councillor Houlihan.
Yes.
Councillor Lucas.
Aye.
Councillor Mayhem.
Aye.
Councillor O'Malley.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Aye.
Councillor Weatherall.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Yes.
Mayor Raddick.
Aye.
Carried 12-1.
Thank you. So at this point, I think we'll have a break for 15 minutes. Seconded Councillor Mayhem. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So please come back at 22. We're moving on to item 8. Should be 7. Yes, golly, what happened to both? Yes, indeed. Oh, we better do 7. Golly. Item 7 on the agenda, setting of rates. Ms Allen and Mr McAuliffe are here to speak to the report. Are there any questions? Councillor Vandevers.
Why is it in all the pages of differentials that we don't actually have the differential stated? I mean, we've got, 0.0084 cents in the dollar figures and things that quite frankly don't mean much. Why is it that we don't have the residential rate, for instance, as 1, and then the commercial rate as 2.5 as a differential?
Thank you, Councillor. We're just getting you the relevant page in the 9-year plan document. So on page 250 of the 9-year plan document, we have the general rate. All of the rating is explained starting on that page.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. My question was, in item 7, this is the setting of rates for the financial year. This is the... Yeah, referring to the plan is fine, but when you have extensive talk in the setting of rates about the differentials, and you have to go to another document to try and find the differentials, why can the differentials not be up front? Why are they not plainly seen here in plain language that people can understand? That is to say, residential 1, commercial 2.5, for instance.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll get this, Councillor. And so this is a technical report required to set the rates, and it does support the 9-year plan. But to your point, for next time, provided it meets the requirements of what we have to set the rate, we can ensure that the differential is in there.
My understanding is that this resolution and the paper on what we're actually doing with this subsequent motion of setting the rates for the financial year is just purely the technical detail of what we need to consider in order to set the rates. And, just as we saw in earlier conversation, we do have 400 pages of the 9-year plan here to refer to. So this is just the technical detail required to make the decision required to support this 400 pages. So naturally, we don't want to be having to duplicate every section of the 9-year plan into the technical decision that we need to make. Was that an accurate overview of it?
Broadly, and this is there is a technical way that you are required to set the rates to be able to apply them. This responds to that. It may be in the executive summary that we could put something that actually just said what the differentials are, so the paper stands on its own without people needing to refer back. But in terms of the paper before you, it's difficult to change it now.
If we look at page 28 of 76, it says here, the differential categories based on land use are residential. What's to stop us having a 1 beside residential and then having the figures for lifestyle, commercial, farmland, residential and stadium as an actual differential? Can you give me those differentials now, assuming 1 for residential?
They're on page 250.
Yes, Councillor, they're on page 250 of the document. So residential is 1. Lifestyle is 0.95. Commercial is 2.5. Farmland is 0.8. Residential heritage bed and breakfast is 1.75. And stadium is 0.18. And I just remind councillors that that isn't the only differential that we have. So there are differentials for the targeted rates as well. Yes.
Thank you very much for that detail. Look forward to seeing it in the actual document next time.
Are there any?
If I can just check, we will have to test whether or not we can do that next time, as I said. So it may or may not be possible. But also, Councillor, we have said we are looking at our financial reporting and being more, providing information slightly differently. But if audit requires this to be done in and presented in a certain way, then we will have to do that.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I see none. Thank you. That being the case, I move that Council sets the rates as detailed. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Lucas. And in moving this, we have, this is simply what we have to do to comply with the legislation and approve our method of setting rates. And, we had extensive discussion and debate about this during our 4 days of deliberations. And this is where we're at. Straightforward. Has anyone got any other comment? Councillor Vandervis.
Like the actual debt increase figures, where you had to go through 400 pages to try and find them, this again is a situation where, on the basis that it's a technical detailed report, the absence of clearly identifying the fact that, for instance, commercial pays 2.5 times what a residential zoning would pay, is something that I think needs to be highlighted, especially when you consider that our competing cities, Invercargill and Christchurch, have much lower commercial differentials. And in the case of Invercargill, no differential at all. The difficulties that we create for commerce here start with the rates and go through a whole lot of other issues, including development contributions, including planning hurdles that are higher here than in other zones. We've got serious issues here which I think need to be highlighted. They need to be debated. They need to not be just hidden in the technical detail of a technical report. These are serious issues affecting Dunedin's development. We need to address the fact that commerce is not doing particularly well in Dunedin, and that we have to become more equitable about charging for services that relate to the cost of the services to provide. And I have to bring up again the stadium gift that is done via this technical report, via this differential of 0.018. Is it 0.18, is it? Pardon me, I've written that down incorrectly. The fact that the stadium is severely discounted in its rates and in so many other ways, again, distorts the actual level of problem that the cost of running the stadium really is. So I am going to vote against this again, as I have in the past, because it doesn't actually create differentials where the different users of our services are actually paying for the services in any proportional way. The subsidy of residential by commercial being one of the main issues.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I thought the opportunity to debate these issues would have been back in January and again in May, but so I'm surprised that we're still going through that process. But in responding, and Councillor Vandervis and I will agree to disagree on this once again, nobody wants the rates to be what they are, but the practicality of how we run the city is what the numbers are, and it's the equation that we've come to. But I take umbrage again around the fact of the business rate versus the homeowner rate and the residence rate. I would say most residents of our city are paying for their rates in after-tax dollars. It's coming out of the bottom line of what's in their pocket at the end of the day. Businesses have the fortunate aspect of writing off the rates as an expense. And I think that is quite a difference to be had. Yes, it is a number, and I'm sorry, but we are not in Invercargill. I quite like being Dunedin. And I think when we look at what we offer in our rates to our businesses, some will agree that it's worthwhile and some will agree it isn't. It's like anything to do with rates, you will not get that perfect balance. But we have to work our way through, and we had the opportunity to listen to business owners come and present to us. I don't recall many talking to us about the rate differential and what they're paying versus what they're getting, but I think that next time they're welcome to come and tell us more. But at the end of the day, this is not the time to be debating this issue. That should have taken back in January especially. Thank you. Happy to support.
Councillor O'Malley.
I think I'm just going to follow up from Councillor Wiley on that one. The time to debate the rate differentials is another time. This is actually just an item that is the calculation of what will happen based on what we've come through all the series of decisions that we've got to here. So not to vote on this is in my opinion, I will vote on this because I would say this is simply an administrative component of where we are. The debate and the political positions that we take were in the past. This is where the council has arrived. But even if you are going to take that further, should we maybe, all fairness and equity, then put the farm rate up to 1? You know, we've set these rates around because we're talking about ability to carry the burden. And I've been witness to this debate before and did go to Christchurch and have a look where the ratios are closer. But when you take the business contribution down, it has to go back to the residential to go up. It's the only other way to do it. We still have to collect the money. And so, yes, Christchurch has a different differential, but it has a higher rate because of that.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I will be supporting this, and I don't always support the rates increase. Actually, I've opposed, I think, all of them, most of them anyway. At least, yeah, can't remember if I might have supported one, I think, when we were 6 point something. But you know, I haven't supported numerous votes. The last 17.5, I definitely oppose that. And we've come down from that. Remember, these are high, but we were 17.5. So we've come down a lot to, you know, we're now 10.7. And we've gone out to the people in our community saying that we would set the rates at just over 10%. So this amount is not a surprise to anyone who has followed the LTP. And what we have done, I don't like it. Nobody around the table likes a higher rate increase. I can tell you, as I said before, every single council in our country is going through the same thing. Some have managed to be a bit lower, but most are higher, and most are higher than us. And we also haven't chosen to slash and burn. And some people have been screaming, slash this, slash that. I don't support that. I think what we've done here is a good mix. We've invested in our city for growth. There'll be jobs come from the projects we've committed to. There'll be a revival of some sectors in our community because of what we've done. And the infrastructure investment, which is the majority of our spend in this budget, is, as you've heard, massive. And we have thought, and we've done it for the future, and for other people to be critical of us and say this city's going to hell in a handbasket because we're not investing for the future and they've got to change everything is a load of rubbish. We are, almost our whole investment in this LTP is for the future of our city, and it's going to be a good future because we'll have pipes that work and we'll have good infrastructure. And the city can be proud of what it's doing here. There is investment. It's a bit of a hard time, and I know it's tough. I don't like it either, but we've got a few years of this toughness, and then we come through it. And we'll come through holding our head high because we've made huge investments for the good of the city.
I don't don't see any other speakers, therefore I'll just come back with a couple of comments that I totally disagree with Councillor van der Vis. The facts and figures are not hidden. They're there included in the draft, in the 9-year plan. It's clearly written out, or sure, there's 400 pages, but it's got a perfectly good table of contents at the front, and it's actually reasonably easy to find anything you like in that plan. And so it is absolutely not hidden. It is there for anyone. It's public and online. It's there for anyone to see and scrutinise. All you have to do is have a wee look. This paper that we're looking to approve here is just the technical administrative consideration of what we need to approve in order to set the rates, as has already been debated and agreed. Nothing is hidden. This is just the technical side. Now, you know, meddling in the administrative affairs of council and trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of what's in the report to please everyone around the table, we'd be spending hours here debating what everyone would like to see. So everything is included in the 400 pages of 9-year plan. This is just the administration. I'll put the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No. Recorded, please.
Thank you. Item 8. And just before we move on to item 8, which is the Christchurch and Dunedin City Council Shared Services Update Report, I have a few apologies to note. I have apologies from Councillor Barker and Councillor Gilbert, who are no longer online, so will not be joining us, will not be with us for the remainder of the meeting. And also an apology from, that had its torturous path to get to me, from Councillor Benson Pope, who is ill today and so unable to be here. And so I just move that Council accepts those apologies. Seconded Councillor Mayhem. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. So, Christchurch City, we have Mr Ward, who's coming to speak to it, who's been leading this work with Christchurch City to work on shared services. And further, the net purpose and focus of this initiative is to work on economies of scale between our two cities and reduce costs for both. So this is not about owning each other's water or paying for each other's water. This is about figuring out what are the things we can work on together to achieve best economies of scale for our residents. Mr Ward, do you have any further prefacing comments?
Kia ora, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much. Yes, you may recall under the Memorandum of Understanding that was approved by Council, we were to form a working group, and the working group were to assess the opportunities for shared services, a great moment of deliberation for us. And I have with me 2 members of the working group here to hopefully assist with answering questions. So we have a Procurement and Contracts Manager, Mr Serge Coleman, and also our Capital Delivery Manager, Ms Dominika Bizek-Cochen. We also had among the group Dr Jonathan Barnsley, who's a Senior Process Scientist at our Manground Water Treatment Plant. So we had a broad range of experience representing the working group, and happy to take questions.
Fantastic. Are there any questions? Councillor van der Vis.
Delighted to see the procurement and capital projects, procurement opportunities, bulk and all the rest of it. All that makes wonderful sense, and I'm glad that's being seriously looked at. I had a question regarding laboratory facilities, because I've recognised that in the past getting laboratory tests here, quite often we've had to send samples to the North Island. The turnaround has been, in one case that I had, was 6 to 8 weeks, and I'm wondering what laboratory facilities do Christchurch have, and if they are good, will we be able to have a cost-effective access to those facilities?
Thank you for your question, Councillor van der Vis. That's very much why it's a candidate for consideration. They do have considerable services. My colleagues may wish to add anything. And so they have ION's accredited facility, and In terms of the cost effectiveness of that, that's what we'd have to test. But in terms of the turnaround time, that's something we'd certainly be looking at. But please be aware, some of the tests do take an amount of time depending on the nature of the sample and the test that's required.
Thank you. Councillor Gary, followed by Councillor Walker.
Thank you. Page 48, number 5, and the example given is around tasks individually too small scale but viable when combined. How would biosolids trucking work in that regard? I was curious, given it's two quite separate locations geographically apart.
Apologies, Councillor, I'm just finding the appropriate page.
Page 48, it's number 5 in the table at the top, economies of scale initiatives, and number 5, resource efficiency and capacity smoothing. Maybe the page numbers are different.
Yeah, apologies. I was trying to find it, but so those are some of the opportunities that we've discussed and would require further investigation. Biosolids is obviously one that we're looking at here at the Dunedin City Council as well, options around that long term, and that may be one of those opportunities that we could identify and look at, but would require considerable investigation.
So I was trying to get my head around how that could even work, given two separate locations.
It would be a matter of finding ways to find efficiencies and see whether there is a genuine opportunity there. But this is one of those high-level opportunities that may be an opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Just on the biosolids, it's my observation, and I just want to know if I'm correct or not, that we have 3 methods of dealing with biosolids currently, or one which is burning, and we do about half, and then one which is to disposal to landfill, but a third which we're investigating is converting to some kind of useful product. And I believe there's a possibility for a fourth, which is converting to an energy source for, burning to power a heat supply or electricity supply plant that, some people have talked to me lately. Does that cover the options that we know of at the moment, or perhaps there's even further options?
I think in terms of global terms, what you've described is correct, Mr. Mayor. In terms of what's suitable for us, that's something we had been previously working through and is described in the infrastructure strategy. The main thrust for us at the moment is around beneficial reuse in the first instance.
And so talking with Christchurch meant that if we came up with an idea that was small scale and efficient, we could maybe buy a plant each, as opposed to, trucking it from one to the other.
And I think
but who knows?
And I think what you describe is really what's at the heart of the collaboration opportunities. It's the ability to test those things more readily than we can on our own.
Great, thank you. And the Councillor Walker is next, followed by Councillor Malley and someone else. Anyway, Councillor Walker.
Kia ora, guys, and kia ora, Dave, Serge, et al. Nice that I'm abroad for once, Serge, and not you. But anyway, on that note, thanks for this paper. And the question I have, even though this is just for noting, of course, in terms of exploring ways forward, it's around the benefits and this, I guess, the sweet spot between the benefits, i.e. the gains, against just simply doing it. So let's just take, for example, the bulk purchasing. Is there any early sense, and you can give me an example of anything you'd purchase, whether that be pipes or whatever, what the sort of quantums would be? And the second part of that is, I presume you wouldn't just go down the line of bulk purchasing together if there's ultimately no accrued benefit for either us or Christchurch. So it's those trickier bits, I guess, of what happens as we move forward in terms of the financial benefits.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I want to be careful around the quantum of the potential benefits. I think that's what we need to investigate. So I wouldn't want to hazard a guess around that. And obviously, if there is no real benefit around that bulk procurement, then we wouldn't pursue it. Would be my expectation. But that is what the next piece of work would be around, is to try and quantify that in more detail so that councils can make an informed decision.
Thanks. And I presume that Christchurch are as enthusiastic about this as we are.
From my perspective, the conversations that we've had today have been really collaborative and in good spirit. So I would assume so. Yeah.
And if I may add, please, Councillor Walker, procurement is, as you might imagine, a very broad church area, and would cover many things, including the procurement of professional services, for example. So please don't think of it just as like materials or consumables. There's a lot that goes on and spend in terms of the planning, design and the construction space, which is why it was important that we had our capital delivery manager on the working group. I am aware that, and you may also be aware that Christchurch City Council are taking their version of this paper to their council this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Councillor Malley.
Thank you. I'm guessing actually the biosolar trucking might be that the facility itself is going to be very, very expensive to build, is it not? Biosolar facility. So it may be economically viable to build one and then truck to it.
Potentially. Again, back to this is we're casting a very wide net at the moment, and as you might imagine, we did that in a short amount of time. So these are just putting some a framework on the table for us to start to then build upon.
And sort of touching this on laboratory capacity as well, or capabilities. There could be a perverse outcome, which is that Christchurch being 3 times bigger than us, biosols would be a good example. You would build it in Christchurch and then truck the smaller volumes towards Christchurch, because it would make very little sense to build it here and then move them down from Christchurch. Laboratory capacity, again, and capabilities, you've got a 3-to-1 use ratio. Would we be considering as we go forward that making sure that we haven't put our eggs in their basket by accident? I imagine we're going into this in good faith, but that could still let us up in a place where we have actually now positioned ourselves that we actually have to be with Christchurch from that point on.
No, we are, and say hand on heart in terms of our dealings with our peers have been on that basis, and what's in the best interest for both councils.
It won't be on the table right now, but I could imagine if we get this off the ground and we show this cooperative activity working, we've obviously got Oamaru, Timaru and Ashburton between us. So would we be maybe thinking in the long term that we would then showcase this to the other councils in the area and say that they could be involved in some way or another?
So yeah, subject to council's willingness to do that, of course, yes. But for us as professionals in the sector, we all find this very exciting, because this is where we can support each other and be more resilient. So hopefully you've got a sense of that coming through in the short paper that it is. Yeah.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. I'm impressed that in such a short time period you've already come up with this framework, and I guess I'm just wondering the time frame going forward. I mean, there's obviously some low-hanging fruit that can be, I'm imagining, action quite quickly between us and Christchurch, but is there a sense of when some of these things might come to fruition?
That's a really good question, and I think that's classically the difficulty when you're trying to do everything at once. It's choosing succinctly the things that you can positively take forward, and that will be the challenge for us. But for us to the desire is to get some runs on the board, so to speak, this calendar year. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Van der Vis.
We're currently looking at introducing AI to a number of our systems. Christchurch ahead of us in that regard. I'm just looking at IT systems, asset management and technology. Do they already have AI in, for instance, their joint communications and billing areas?
Thanks for your question, Councillor Van der Vis. It'd be hard for me to give you a full and complete answer right now. Based on our discussions, I think they're probably at a similar state to ourselves. They are looking at how to introduce performance standards and asset management efficiencies, which will be woven into their review of their technology. So I think they're at a similar point to ourselves in terms of what they're grappling with. They have different systems to us. That doesn't mean they're any better or worse necessarily. So again, it's an opportunity at a moment in time when we can work on this collaboratively together.
Okay. Any further questions? I see none. Thank you very much. So I'll move that Council notes the progress in the sharing opportunities between Dunedin and Christchurch. Secretary Councillor O'Malley. And in speaking to this, I think this has really good potential to decrease the cost of water services for each council. And I think in addition to that, it has the advantage of working collaboratively with a large neighbour, and that the benefits of that collaboration and cooperation can also spread out to other councils around the South Island. So starting with the two largest, to figure out how we optimise our services and keep the costs to a minimum through economies of scale is just a fairly natural and sensible way to go. Thank you. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm excited about this too. It effectively brings forward what the previous government was trying to do with the water entities without actually having to change the assets ownership. I will remain to see what bulk purchasing will give us, given that for Christchurch it's only going to increase their bulk purchasing by 30%. I have a feeling that was an overstated ambition by the DIA at the time. But what I do think is interesting is harmony and harmonising of assets and behaviours and systems, because that in fact will bring, I think, quite good savings. If nothing else, will bring efficiencies. So I'm really excited about this, because this is actually taking the only good part out of Three Waters Reform from Labour and moving it into here. I think the other point being, we talk about how the South Island is underrepresented over the years, and I think that this early interaction between Christchurch and Dunedin is something we should foster on other fronts as well, and make sure that we are unified in our position on a lot of things, so that we can speak in unified voices at times when we've got to wake up Wellington and tell them to really think about us.
Indeed. Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Councillor O'Malley just took a lot of what my key points were going to be, and the fact being I actually see this in the same way Councillor O'Malley does, and I guess others around the table, that this is actually, to me, just a starting point of what other services and work that the two councils can do together, and also taking that voice to Wellington. I also look at the fact that actually this also gives both organisations and their staff, their existing staff, an understanding of where they're positioned. And because, to be honest, when you look around the country, and not just here in New Zealand but also in Australia and even beyond, there is such a challenge to find good staff with the expertise and to retain them in places like the South Island. We've got a lot of advantages, and I think, but at the same time, sometimes you can't match the salaries and some of those others. But when you look at the balance of having two councils of our size working together, that gives people an opportunity to progress and advance. And again, to me, this is also how we should be looking at a wider approach with a lot of council services.
Councillor Mayhem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the previous speakers. It makes sense for two metro cities to work together. And this report's just for noting, but I'd like to point out there's a broad range of activities, not just bulk procurement, that we can benefit here. Laboratory services, professional services, resource efficiency, administrative collaboration, and operational efficiencies. So the work's about to commence between the two councils, initially just exploring options, feasibility assessments to find opportunities and efficiencies. Then later this year we can look at implementation. I think this is a really good move, and I look forward to developing this relationship further.
Councillor Hurley. Thank you. Councillor Hurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I just want to say thank you first of all to Councillor O'Malley, who has really worked hard on this. I think it's an innovative answer to a solution that it actually ticks every box. Our concern and the concern of many of the residents in our city and other cities around New Zealand has been who's going to have ownership of the assets in the water. And what this has done, we've kept the ownership in council, and what we've done is collaborated with, by doing this, we'll be collaborating with a larger player. We can share experience, we can learn from them, and they probably can learn from us as well. We've got a team of really experienced staff too. We can share services if we need to, but experience, but we keep ours all in-house. But if we ever come to major trouble for any reason, I'm sure, because we've got that existing relationship now and building on it, that if we ever got in trouble, we can make a call and say, can you help us out? And I think they'd be there. Well, I'd like to think they would be, and vice versa if the same situation happened. I also see a huge benefit, what Councillor O'Malley raised before and others have said, in other areas, and not just for council stuff. Our university, Business South, all our different areas in our city could benefit from this relationship, from collaborating and working together, because the South Island does need to pitch stronger for hospital, for example. If we had Christchurch behind us saying, look, government, support Dunedin for this hospital, things like that, if we have them backing us and other things, it makes us a stronger voice. So the more we can collaborate, the better it is for our city.
Thank you. I think everyone's been covered. So, and I don't think there's anything further to say. It's a report for noting. Progress is being made. I think everyone's very supportive around it. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Number 9, Dunedin City Holdings group of companies. We have Mr. Lone and Mr. Hocking, who'll come to the table and answer questions. They may also have prefacing comments.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. No further comment. Happy to take questions on the paper as presented.
Are there any questions? I see none. Councillor Vandevers.
I was a wee bit surprised to read on page 2 of 130 that DCHL did not receive formal written feedback from Council this year, but we have endeavoured to faithfully answer and respond to queries raised in those meetings. Was it expected that we would give you formal written feedback?
So, was it expected? We've had formal written feedback, or we certainly had formal written feedback last year. I think the extent to which written feedback is given probably depends on the level of concern Council has with the draft SOIs presented. We didn't receive formal written feedback this year. So sometimes we do. It's not specifically required. We have a letter of expectation, which is given to us at the outset of the process, and that gives us a fairly good degree of guidance around what's required in the SOIs going forward.
On page 5, we have Dunedin Stadium's SOI, forecast term loans remaining flat to 26 and 28 periods. DCHL will continue to work with DCC management around long-term plan to sustain capital expenditure and repay borrowings. The repay borrowings for the stadium, which after 14 years I think is still at 85 million, is that correct? How, given the increasing debt that we've just ticked off of 120 and then 121 million for the next couple of years, given that we have massively increased our borrowings, how is it proposed that you could repay the borrowings of the now getting quite old stadium?
So there's been quite a bit of work done by EY in terms of a review, and that's been coupled with some further work by Deloitte, who have a good understanding of the financial model that surrounds the stadium, including the use of subvention payments. What we are doing with Council at the moment is working on a long-term model which looks out to the end of the stadium's life, and we're having to estimate what we think that would be. We're taking into account what we anticipate the value of the land would be at the end of its life, and we're wanting to ensure that at that point in time the level of debt that Council has is not in excess of the value of the land, and working through what would be required in terms of debt repayment between now and then. The short answer to your question is we would need further injection from Council to further equity injection to bring the debt down to what we believe is a reasonable level at the end of the asset's life. We don't know what that injection is as yet.
Have you estimated a date for the end of life?
So we've worked on 2060 as an estimated end-of-life date, and that is just an estimate at this point in time, but that's working on the basis of a 50-year life for the stadium. That could be extended through enhancement to the asset over its life. So, that, as I say, that is just an estimate.
Thank you. If we go to page 9, the review of the DCC's draft investment framework. Can you confirm, I think you have mentioned it before, but can you confirm when that will be available to us, when it will be finished?
We are aiming to have the investment framework in a form for Council review, and it may be there may be further iterations after this, but we're aiming for that to be in September this year.
Thank you very much for that. Getting to the SOIs, my memory of 2 years ago at least was that we had included in a number of the SOIs a priority for paying dividends to Council. Looking through the SOIs as they now appear, that priority seems to have disappeared, and the priority has become again growing the respective businesses. I note also where there was a request from the DCC to focus on not just building the businesses but giving us a regular dividend, that when that was translated into the SOI rather than dividend, it became return. A dividend is something specifically from the companies to the DCC. A return can be just about anything. And I'm wondering why it is that the latest SOIs do not continue to have as a priority, as in fact the purpose of having the companies, and that purpose being not just to grow these companies, but the purpose being to give a dividend stream to Council. Why is that no longer highlighted as a priority in the SOIs that I've been reading?
I'm not aware that there has been a change in the SOIs in relation to that.
No, I don't believe there's been any softening of language here, and also the individual dividend policies of these companies. Other than Aurora, which is a specific case, which we've talked with Council a lot about, the other companies have a very high percentage of net profit after tax or free cash flows coming back in the form of dividend. It really is a high priority. I'm sorry that's not coming through in the statements of intent.
With your permission, I'll send some emails and try and get some clarification because it's a bit detailed. Thank you.
Questions? Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. in our papers on page 31, which is page 13 of Aurora, where it talks about their financial forecasts, and they talk in particular that the high level of uncertainty as they hope to move from the CPP to the DPP, and they'll get confirmation that later in the year. And obviously the dividend forecast overall for DCHL relies heavily on Aurora coming back to starting paying dividends within the next 3 years. How confident is DCHL that they will be able to do that?
We are very confident.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. Maybe a question for you, Mr. Mayor, or the CEO. My understanding is this is for agreeing to the statement of intents and signing them off, versus actually debating the points of it, because there's been opportunity for councillors to go through that process.
Well, that's true, but
yeah, the ultimate aim of the meeting is to sign off the SOIs, but it's, if councillors have questions and the director is happy to answer them, then I think it's fine.
I mean, we're not in debate, we're in questions. So.
Our ability to make changes at this point, I think, is
Minimal.
very limited.
So I'm just trying to get clarification that, and I look at the word agrees to the completed as in the recommendation to council. So it tells me that that a lot of the work has been done on this, and to be basically interrogating the speakers, presenters, on individual issues versus where we could have done that in previous space.
Well, it has been done in previous spaces, but it's a question time and it's opportunity to ask questions again. People want to ask questions, they're free to do so. But we have answers that we've already had before, and we can see in the papers before us actually.
But there is a statutory process that has been followed in the development of the statement of intent, and this is the final stage in that statutory process.
So I do have a question to Mr. Hocking and Mr. Lone. Is there anything new in here that hasn't been presented previously?
I think the key addition is the finalisation of the forecasts by each of the entities, and the end result hasn't been a dramatic change in terms of the financial position for DCHL, but there has been quite a bit of movement within the individual entities. But no, there's nothing, no dramatic changes in the SOIs from what you've seen previously, other than the updating of those financial forecasts.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vandervis.
If we go to page 32 and look at the Aurora dividend policy, it says that Aurora Energy will consider dividends once the company can achieve and sustain a position in excess of FFO, which is funds from operations, to debt of 8.5 to 9%, which is consistent with comparable entities. Which comparable entities are you talking about?
Sorry, we're referring to comparable lines companies. Yeah, in terms of whether it's a new addition, it's the dividend policy that has been in place with Aurora.
So that dividend policy has been in place for some time?
I believe so, yeah.
Sorry, the corporate entities that it's consistent with, what corporate entities are they? Sorry, comparable entities, what are they?
So primarily the evaluation we've done is against other lines companies.
Councillor Vandervis, if I could just draw your attention to the DCHL statement of intent on page 16 of the agenda, page 11 of the report. And that details the dividend position, including the Aurora. So from it speaks at an overarching level from the DCHL point of view.
You're talking about the 9 million, and 11 million that are detailed on that page?
Yes, but in the previous page there is also the rationale and the statements about why.
Right, thank you for that.
Okay. Are there any further questions? Councillor Wiley.
Just for clarification around that, any council going forward has the ability to push harder for a dividend from the companies, correct?
So the process is normally through the letter of expectation. What we're endeavouring to do, though, is have a fairly open relationship with council so that we can get direction as we progress through the year as well. We're relaying the need for dividends to the companies. Any future council would have the ability to change direction on that, and we would endeavour to relay that message through to the companies as well.
But that needs to be in the context as set out in the DCHL statement of intent of the decision to keep Aurora, and the statement of intent outlines what that means, because the directors still have a responsibility with both the council business and the company business needing to be managed prudently.
Okay, so just before we move to the motion, I've got a question. Page 4 of the statements of intent, there is a graph. It very clearly and graphically outlines the dividend situation, the available income from free cash flows situation of the council control companies. And my reading of that graph shows that DCHL's drive and I suppose priority to provide dividends to council has now put the companies in a position of unsustainability. Because to me, that extra borrowing right at the end, the bottom right-hand corner of the graph, is not something that can be continued into the future. We know we have to get more income from the companies, hopefully, but we can't have too much certainty about that. We are in the privileged position of owning Aurora, which is a regulated company, so with a fair degree of certainty we can predict a return to profitability of that one. But the other ones very much depend on your management and market forces and how things go. So I'm just concerned that yes, in this year we have DCHL is providing dividend to council, but it's unsustainable to carry on borrowing like that. Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
Yes, I think to carry on borrowing to pay dividend would be unsustainable and certainly wouldn't have the support of our board. So we would be very concerned if that was an ongoing situation. We have done further forecasts into the future, and whilst we are borrowing 6.7 million, or that's what we're forecasting for this coming year, that reverses as we go forward. So we've done similar waterfall graphs for the following years, and we're seeing that debt repaid 3.6 million in FY27, 2.9 million in FY28. So we don't fully recover the amount that we've borrowed this year and into next year, but we're seeing a position where that debt is coming back to levels that we're more comfortable with.
Great. So there's just basic fiscal prudence. It's good to have
Yeah,
moving to a
and just to
situation.
add to that, one of the key things here is that it's effectively borrowing to smooth, because council has given us a very clear steer. It wants a consistent, regular amount each year.
Yeah.
So the big gap is DCHL's largest investment is Aurora, given that there is this period where there is no dividend. So that's very material to those future assumptions that with an Aurora dividend resuming in FY27 enables us to continue making those desired or those dividend expectations set out in the 9-year plan, and to repay this short-term borrowing that we've incurred in FY25 and FY26.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Vandervis.
Turning to city forests on page 39, it says here that city forests' primary objective is to maintain and enhance the values of the forest estate, including economic, social and environmental values. And it goes on, that's achieved through sustainable management, sustainable harvest levels, etc. my question is, why is it that the primary objective is to maintain and enhance the forest estate when the primary objective should be providing a dividend to council? It says in the line above that City Forests aims to contribute to the DCC's strategic framework and achievement of city objectives, but it doesn't highlight a dividend as a priority, which I'd understood at previous SOIs were highlighting.
Well, again, I don't believe there's been a change in relation to that from previous SOIs. What we are enforcing with City Forests is the need to maintain cash distributions. And within that primary objective, they are looking to enhance the value of the asset. So the forest estate is the asset that we have, and including within that is the economic value, so giving an economic return to the city from that forestry estate.
And just building on that, the dividend policy of City Forests is to return by way of cash dividend at least 75% of net profit after tax or 90% of operating cash flows after capitalised costs of forest.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so I'll move that we agree to the completed statements of intent of the DCHL and its subsidiary and associated companies. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Lucas. And in speaking to this, I'd just like to firstly thank the directors, the chair and general manager for prioritising cash returns to council, those dividends that Councillor Vandervis talked about. However, as they point out, that's not a sustainable situation looking at how it's gone this year. However, simultaneous with that, they are moving to a sustainable situation. So it will be over the fullness of time. So that smoothing of the free cash flows has enabled council to get some offset for some of its expenditure. So that's very helpful for us and for residents and ratepayers. Thank you. The other side of that coin is that it is vitally important that they do return to sustainability, because certainly over decades in business, and I'm sure that applies to anyone who's been a business observer around this table and in the community, history is littered with companies that have failed because the owners of those businesses have taken too much money out of the business and had their main focus of attention being their own personal good and their personal expenditure versus the good of the company itself. It is vitally important that if you're going to have a business, you need to be working on keeping the business sustainable and working well and in a state of balance. And certainly many business owners I know, will vary the amount of money they take out of the business according to the economic times they find themselves in. And when times are tough, they will take less money out of the business in order to shore up the business and make sure that it is sustainable and gets through those hard times, so that when times do come better, then perhaps they will increase their earnings out of the business. And that give and take is something that happens in businesses throughout the community as part of the normal term of events. Colleen, are there any other speakers? Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Just briefly, it's good to see Aurora returning to a dividend policy, but that does come at where they will have to borrow, and which concerns me because they don't have the free cash flow. They have a significant capital program, and if I look at the total capital program that Dunedin City Holdings has on their page 14, if in year 3 they've got 146 million, 146 million, no more than that, which is primarily Aurora. All of those 3 years, that capital program is Aurora, and the term loans for Dunedin City Holdings for the combined group by the end of 2028 will be 1.865 billion, and combined with our debt, we're heading towards over $3 billion of debt for Dunedin City Council and the Dunedin City Group, that's a scary number. I don't think people can actually comprehend how much debt that we have, and the only reassuring thing that I have is that this council has, during our long-term plan deliberations, has moved to have a debt repayment policy, because we cannot continue, not for the companies or for the council, to continue borrowing at this level and expect the companies to keep paying the dividend. But it's good to get to this position where we have worked very closely with Dunedin City Holdings to get to these statements of intent that we are, is with the very few questions that everybody is happy with. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against?
No, recorded, please.
Thank you. Item 10, Dunedin City Holdings Limited share capital. So we have Ms. Allen and Mr. Davies on his way. So are we ahead of time? Hard to believe. All right. So Ms. Allen and Ms. Graham will answer any questions in the interim. Are there any questions? 10, item 10, yes. $10. Very good. Questions? Councillor Vandevers.
On page 53, when it says in C, notes that this level of uncalled capital aligns with the forecast group debt. When you say it aligns with it, does that mean essentially that we are already committed to spending it?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the year 3 of the Statement of Intents and 9-year plan have us raising debt to the level of 1.8 billion.
That's exactly right. Council has just signed off and approved the 9-year plan and the company statements of intent, and this is the mechanism that now needs to be adopted by Council to give effect to the programs that Council has approved.
The next part of the question is that given that the ongoing borrowing is expected to keep rising, how soon are we going to have to raise this level of uncalled capital again? When is it anticipated that it's going to go to 2 billion or worse?
Thank you, Councillor. In the 28-29 year, the forecast this would be breached. So the forecast debt for that year is 1.983 billion. The year after that, it's 2.1.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So I think we're covered. I don't feel there's any need to have Mr. Davey come over. Okay. So I'll move that Council approves the required increase and also authorises the Council to execute the required shareholder resolution, and note that this level of uncalled capital aligns with what is included in the 9-year plan. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Lucas. Now, this is an unfortunate side effect of the state of the situation with the council controlled companies and their finances. They are borrowing to sustain dividends to council, but in doing so they're smoothing out their free cash flows, and they will return to positive cash flows and be able to pay dividends from free cash flows in 3 years' time. And it would be well, we hope that the companies overall get to a stage of all making some profit, so they're generating some free cash flows, and they will be able to start with paying a consistent dividend to council and pay down debt. So, there is a balance to be achieved here between the demands that they provide a dividend and the amount of debt that they have to take on, because currently, in order to meet the demands for dividends, they are borrowing the money, but their free cash flows will bring that into balance. But we need to be mindful of that, of the sustainability of the situation as we balance up our discussions with DCHL and what happens. Of course, the number one objective is to have greater profits from each and every one of the companies. However, there's a whole lot of hard work required to make that happen, but we are certainly, I believe, on that journey. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Vandevers.
In the previous item, Mayor Raddick has said, and I quote, "It's unsustainable to carry on borrowing." Yet that is exactly what we are doing in the DCC and in DCHL, and in both cases to unprecedented levels. Deputy Mayor Lucas has highlighted that it's not just 2 billion that we're heading towards, it's 3 billion. The vulnerability that we have now put ourselves in, the extreme vulnerability of a change in interest rates that in my lifetime I've ended up at some stages paying 22% on second mortgage. Even a doubling of the current interest rate would basically make our whole 9-year plan essentially fall apart. And a doubling of the interest rate would also make any plans that our companies have, quite frankly, just not viable. Debt is the 4-letter word that has not been given sufficient credence. And the other 4-letter word, risk, from the potential of uncontrollable interest rate rises, means that almost everything that we've planned to do that's debt funded makes us extraordinarily vulnerable. The new council that's got to come in, I believe, will have some changed members that will hopefully be more inclined to address the issue of debt and the vulnerability that it brings. All we can do in the meantime is hope and pray that the Middle East doesn't blow up, hope and pray that the price of oil doesn't go up and that interest rates don't follow it, because our vulnerability now to interest rates that are completely out of our control is extreme. What has been in our control is getting into debt in the first place. And that level of control that I'd hoped for, especially in the last few months, especially with the change of the revenue and finance policy, has been absolutely missing. In Councillor Weatherall's words, there's been splash the cash, and it's been borrowed. And the vulnerability that comes with it cannot be overestimated. Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I don't think we can really relitigate what happened in the early 1990s and other aspects. What we have to deal with, what we can look at factually taking place in putting these accounts together and the current business climate. Yes, we have to look at other factors coming on board. So when we take all that information together and when we look at the resolution on the board, I think it's more about focusing today and what's going to happen in the next 3 to 9 years, because that's what we are here to consider. So when I look at this motion and I look at the approve the required increase in share capital of Dunedin City Holdings Limited to provide a 1.9 billion of uncalled capital, I go, okay, why is that? Then you look at the reports we've had in the previous item. Look at the capital infrastructure spend. Look how much we're increasing that by. We're not taking the money in household terms, we're investing in the house. We're not putting holidays on credit cards. And I think that's a really relevant point all the way through what we've done in the long-term plan and in this process here. We're increasing the value of the asset. And I'm getting frustrated with a lot of the debate we're having, or discussion we're having today, actually took place last year around whether we keep or sell Aurora. We went through that process. So we need to stay on target for what the community told us and what these papers tell us. Let's focus going forward rather than looking in the rearview mirror. And I think the part being is actually, yes, we may, look at $1.9 billion as a lot of money. I totally agree. That's mind-boggling. But so are the value of the companies as a whole. And I think that's what you look at, how each rises. You can't say the debt's increasing and the company values are dropping. That margin is not widening. They're moving together. They're rising with the tide. And I think that's the important part. And I want to just read a key piece for the paper so everybody in this room is on page. In page 15 of our reports in DCHL, or page 10 of the 13-page report. A classic line here, Aurora is planning an elevated capital investment program across the next 10 years and probably longer, driven by network growth and decarbonisation. Elevated capital investment program. That's what's happening with the companies. And I think that's the important part to remember. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Yes, just to be clear that the need for these resolutions is as a consequence of the decision that we made about Aurora.
Thank you. Councillor Mayhem.
Just to agree with the previous speakers, we knew that retaining Aurora would mean delays in our dividends, and we want to achieve the best for our investments, but the dividends can only be made after we meet the 5.9 million shareholder advance, interest, external borrowings, operational costs for DCHL, and funding for the Dunedin Railways Limited. We made a resolution on the 28th of January this year to provide long-term equity to fund Dunedin Railways Limited and deliver a strategic plan to get it operational. So this is all a part of it, and I think we just have to play the long game and look to the future, and that in time we will get those dividends back from our investments. Thank you.
Councillor Ulan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the public told us resoundingly they wanted us to keep Aurora, and so that's what we've done. And as a result of that, we have this, which is pretty shocking, actually. But we do still own a company that is, worth a lot of money, and it's a very profitable business. But this is a bit sobering to look at those figures, I must say. They are. I don't like looking at them. I'll have to look away.
Okay, so in responding to this, I'd say I'd like to commend the directors of DCHL because, they have responded very well to the decisions of council. And they brought to us, we looked at what on earth to do with DCHL and where it's at. And so they brought to us papers and a proposal to sell Aurora, which was really a big surprise to everyone around the table. Gosh. And we then considered that and put it out for public consultation. And we got a resounding no, do not sell Aurora back from the public and residents of Dunedin. And so it's not as though they have decided, we have decided. The public of Dunedin were very clear, and to my knowledge, there is no candidate standing for election in this election at this point that is saying, yes, if I come in, I'm going to sell Aurora. Rather the opposite. So and let's look at Aurora, which is our largest single company. On a good day, it could sell for the whole of that uncalled capital. So on a good day with the wind blowing in the right direction, the sale of that company would repay all of that uncalled capital, all of that debt. So it's not an inconsequential company, it's not unsubstantial. But, that's we're not going to do that. We're going to keep that company and keeping investing in it, or it's going to keep investing in itself, and we're going to keep growing it. And that is what the public of Dunedin asked for, and no uncertain terms. That was very clear. So, that is this is the nature of democracy. And they had their say, and we're the ones charged with implementing, and it's the way we voted in line with what the public request was. And so we are now duty bound to increase the share capital of DCHL, but also knowing in mind that, as has been pointed out, the total value of those companies is well in excess of that debt. So whilst, it's just a relative situation. So, and I commend the companies because in the meantime, with not being able to sell Aurora, they're getting on with improving the value of those companies and returning a dividend to us as we asked. So, it's not an easy job, but they're doing a very good job of doing it. So, that said, I'll put the motion that we approve the required increase and everything else required. All those in favour say aye.
Division, please.
Division. Okay, let's have a division.
Councillor Ackland.
Aye.
Councillor Gary.
Aye.
Councillor Houlihan. Pardon?
Yes.
Councillor Lucas.
Aye.
Councillor Mayhem.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Aye.
Councillor Weatherall.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Yes.
Mayor Raddick.
Aye.
Carried 9-1.
Thank you. Moving on. Item 11, actions from resolutions of council meetings. Bearing in mind we've just taken an action which is resulting from a resolution of a council meeting. Here we go. So page 58 of our agenda, and Ms Graham will speak to the report.
Happy to take questions, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Are there any questions? Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you, and I'll ask this question in Councillor Gilbert's absence about on page 60 about the unitary authority, and I note there's no update. I'm just the initial action was to have an initial meeting in early 2025. I'm just wondering what is there any plans on that?
No, when I checked in with staff, they weren't able to provide an update. I know initial conversations had happened trying to align diaries, but that had proven unsuccessful.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is on page 62, to do with the SLA with the fringe about operating te whare. Will that come back to a committee of council? I don't know who I'm looking at. Or prior to signing, or just after? I'm just wondering what's the... Yeah.
I'll need to check the process, but that may be something that would...
Mr McCracken has comment, I believe. He looks like he's ready to comment.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to just confer with the Chief about that. We're going to discuss that at the recent Community Services Committee, which we weren't able to, get to that order of business.
I'll just have to check in with the team about what the process is for that, given we have no committees.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, once again on behalf of Councillor Gilbert, on page 63 about the single-use cups, and I know, and particularly, and maybe Mr. Kraken can answer that in terms of Toitu, or CEO's can answer that. Is how that's
and I acknowledge the direction that council is setting, but it's a fine line being able to run a viable business in a place like Toitu, where many of your customers are, for example, cruise ship people who don't necessarily have keep cups with them. And so we are doing what we can to promote the use of alternatives to single-use cups. But at this point, single-use cups are still available in Toitu and are likely still to be, to keep a viable cafe operating there.
Thank you. Councillor Melly.
I'm just wondering if staff are aware of the fact the Albatross colony does not allow single-use cups with the available CAF.
Right. Any other questions? I see no questions. Therefore, I move the council notes the open and completed actions from resolutions of council meetings. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Lucas. And I think all questions have asked, and things are proceeding and stuff is being done. Any other speakers? I see none. All those in favour that we note the open and completed actions, say aye. Aye. Again. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 12. Forward work program for council.
Happy to take questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there questions? Yes, there are. Deputy Mayor Lucas.
Thank you. Page 70, the Grants Subcommittee External Representatives. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure where the Grants Review is at, because I know the Grants Review Subcommittee hasn't met at all this year, hasn't met since December. So I'm just not sure where that's at, and then how the process, or what's the process with those external reps. And
I will have to get advice, and unfortunately Ms Moran is not here today. So I'll send a note round once I've clarified that.
Are there any other questions? I see none. Therefore, I'll put the motion. I'll move that council notes the updated forward work program. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Lucas. And speaking to this, I think we've only had one question. People must be happy and with what the situation is with the forward work program. Are there any other comments? Therefore, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Again? Aye. Against? Carried. 12. Now, at this stage, I'll move that we move into non-public to consider the final item on the agenda. Seconded, Deputy Mayor Lucas. All in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Against? Carried. So we'll just allow 5 minutes or so. 10? Or will it? We have to allow time for the speaker, for the media.